Hey guys, welcome back to new video, and in this video we're gonna create complete movie search application with KMP. During this creation of project we will learn a lot of things like Koin Dependency injection framework, KTOR client, and also we will follow clean architecture with MVVM. In this video we're gonna see how we can collect our state flows in iOS platform, because in iOS we are having a very different way of collecting our state flows, so we will look into that. If you're talking about our application, it's a very simple application. When you open the app, it will show you a screen where you can search your movies, and once you see the movie list you can click any of the items, and based on that you will see the complete details. So it's a very simple application. Now without wasting any time, let's get started and see how we can create this beautiful application in KMP. So first let me show you the dependencies. So for that, open up your libs version toml file that present in the gradle directory. This file contains all of the dependencies that we will use in this project, like KTOR client, after that Koin dependency injection framework, then serialization dependency, ViewModel lifecycle dependency, glide dependency. So basically this file contains all of the dependencies that we will use in this project. On the top we are having versions, and on the bottom we are having plugin section. Alright, so now it's time to open up your shared module gradle file, and in this we have common main. So in this particular closure I'm adding our KTOR client dependency. Apart from this Koin dependency injection framework, then for the coroutines we have one dependency. Similarly we are having few dependencies for the iOS main, and on the top we have few dependencies for our Android main module. So when you open up your source you are going to see three modules: Android main. So all of the dependency that you want to use in Android main goes in this closure. Similarly for the common main we have this closure, and on the bottom we are having iOS main closure which belongs to this particular module. Alright, so now it's time to see the API that we will use in this project. So this is the website. I'm gonna give you this website link in the description box. And first thing first, you have to generate your API key. So simply go to this API key. Simply follow the procedure and generate your API key. After that, we will use these two APIs. So this first API will actually use to search your movie based on the query. So this is our response. So first I'm gonna copy this response, come back to my project and start with our data layer. So in this project we're gonna use clean architecture in our shared module, like we are having data layer, domain layer, and our UI layer. So let's begin with that. So in our common main, I'm gonna create few packages, or in this case it's directory. So first we have data directory, then we have domain directory, and lastly our UI directory. Okay, so let's begin with our data layer. So in the data layer we have one more directory, and the directory name is a remote. One more directory which is actually used to store our models. So first I'm going to generate my model. So simply copy this complete response, come back to our project, right click on it, new Kotlin data class file from JSON. By the way, this is a third-party plugin that you can download from the plugin marketplace. Simply paste your JSON response, and here you can give the name. So I'm going to call this a movie response, or instead of calling movie response I'm going to call it search response. There we go. We are having a few model classes corresponding to our JSON. So this is our search response, and this is our search data class. By the way, I'm gonna change this name from search to movie DTO, because this object is used to transfer our data from backend to our mobile device. So that's why we will call this type of object as data transfer object. Okay, don't rename the parameter, only rename the class. Alright, so now we are having our data models. Now it's time to generate a client that is actually used to hit our backend API and get some response from the backend. So for that we're gonna use KTOR client. So let's do that. So first thing first, we require an object, and the object name is KTOR client. In this I'm gonna create a variable, and the variable name is client, which is initialized with the help of HTTP client. And in this HTTP client we have install. So first I want to install content negotiation, and in this content negotiation we are having JSON, and in this JSON I'm gonna pass JSON, because I want to add few other things to my JSON. So we are having here ignore unknown keys, so I'm using here true. Alright, so we are done with our content negotiation initialization. Next we are going to install our HTTP timeouts. So simply use here HTTP timeout. In this we have connection timeout in millis, so I'm using here 3 second. Then we have request timeout millisecond, which is again 3 second. And lastly we have socket timeout millis, which is again 3 second. So this is our client. Now we will use this Ktor client in our API service. So now it's a good time to create our API service in this remote directory. So this is a class, and this class name is API service, and this API service is actually used to hit our backend API and receive some data with the help of Ktor client. So in this API service, I'm gonna pass my client, which is HTTP client. This contains two functions. First function is used to get movies. We require query for that, and this will return me search response. Okay, so for this we have to use our client. In this we have get request. So in the get request we have to pass our URL. So for that, just go to the API endpoint, copy this thing, come back to our project, and on the top I'm gonna simply paste this thing. Now it's time to use it. So for the URL, this is our base URL, so simply I use this base URL here. Then we have parameters. So in the parameter, first parameter is our API key, which is this one. So simply copy the API key, paste it over here. Next we have to pass our parameter, which is S, which actually represent the query that user types. And I want body from this, and in this body, the body type is search response. We are having a problem here. Problem is instead of using here equals to, we have to use a URL function. This function is used to get movies based on the query that user types on the search field. Alright, so now it's time to create one more function which actually used to get the movie details from the backend. So for that, again go to the API endpoint. So this endpoint is used to get the response based on the IMDb ID that movie contains. So I'm gonna simply copy this stuff, come back to our project. Now I'm going to generate model classes for our movie detail response. So this is our response, and I'm gonna call this movie details response. Okay, so in this movie detail response, we are having all the response. Okay, so now it's time to create one more function in our API service so that we get the information from the backend. Suspend function, get movie details, and this time we have to use IMDb ID. Return type of this get movie details would be movie detail response. In this we have to use our client get request because I want to perform get operation that contain URL, and in this URL I'm gonna simply pass my base URL. So copy this stuff and paste in here. In place of parameter, so let me grab the endpoint for you. So this is the endpoint. Come back to our project, simply paste it over here. So we are having our API key and the IMDb ID. So for the API key, simply copy this stuff, paste it over here. For the next, we have to pass our IMDb ID, which is I. And from this, we grab the body, and the body type is movie detail response. Make sure to use a return keyword in front of your client. Okay, so this two function is used to get the movies based on the query and get the movie details based on the IMDb ID respectively. Now it's time to begin with our domain layer. So in the domain layer, first thing first, we have to create directory for our repository, and domain layer contain its own model. And lastly, domain layer contains use cases. Okay, so in the repository, I'm gonna begin with our repository interface, and the repository interface name is movie repository. This interface contains two functions. A first function is used to get the movies based on the query, and next function is used to get the movie detail based on the IMDb ID. So get movies, pass your query in it. So the return type of this get movies function would be a domain layer model. So now it's time to create our domain layer model. So here we have one file, and the file name is movie. This is a data class, and in this data class we have all of the movie information as a parameter in our data class. So go to your movie DTO. This movie DTO is containing few parameters. Simply copy this parameter, come back to your project and paste it over here. Similarly, for the movie details, so we have to create one more domain model for that, and I'm going to call this movie details. This is a file that contains data class naming movie details. Go back to your movie detail response that we have in the data layer model directory. Copy this all parameter, come back to your domain layer model, paste it over here. Make sure to remove this rating because we don't want to use this thing in our project. Okay, so now go back to your movie repository, and now we are having domain layer models. So this will return me list of movie. Suspend function get movie details. We have to pass our IMDb ID. Type is string, and this will return us movie details. Okay, so now we have our movie repository interface. It's time to write its implementation. So the implementation of this movie repository is given by our data layer. So in the data layer, first we need a directory, and the directory name is repository. In this repository, we have to create a class, and the class name is movie repo implementation. Requirement of this thing would be our API service. This will use our movie repository interface. Okay, so simply override two functions, get movies and get movie details. So in the get movies, I'm using API service get movies, pass my search query and simply return this thing up. But this API service dot get movies will give me my DTO, but my requirement is movie is a domain layer model. So my requirement is domain layer model. So we have to map our DTO into domain layer model. So for that we need mappers. So in the data layer we have to create a directory, and the directory name is mappers, and in this mapper we have a file, and the file name is also mapper. So function a list of movie DTO converted into list of movie. Okay, so I'm using here map function, and in this map function we have to transform our data transfer object into movie. So first is poster, so simply pass the poster. Next we have title, so it dot title. Next we have type, so it dot type. Next gets what? It's year, so it dot year. And lastly we are having our IMDb ID. So use here IMDb ID, it dot IMDb ID. So this function is actually used to convert your data transfer object into domain layer object. Now go back to your movie repository implementation and use here search dot to domain, because search represent list of movie DTO. Okay, now come back to your movie repository implementation. It's time to write the implementation for our get movie details. So return API service get movie details, pass your IMDb ID, but this will give me API service dot get movie details. Return type of this thing is movie detail response, but my requirement is movie detail. So for that we have to write a new mapper. So in this mapper I'm having a function, and the function name is movie detail response dot to domain. This will return me movie details. Return we have the response movie details, and in this we have to pass a lot of things like actor, awards, box office. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to simply use my movie detail response parameter. Okay, so simply copy this stuff, all of this stuff, come back to your mapper file and simply paste it. Remove your wall and the type. Alright, so this function is used to transfer our data transfer object into domain layer object. Now go back to your movie repository implementation and use it here. Alright, so this is our movie repository implementation. Now it's time to write our use cases. So go to your domain layer use cases directory and create here one class, and the class name is get movie use case. In this class we have to pass our repository, which is movie repository. This contain an operator function invoke in it. Requirement of this invoke is query, basically queue, and this will use repository.getMovies and simply pass the query. This is a suspendable function, so make sure to use here suspend function. Alright, so this is our first use case. Now it's time to write the second use case, which actually used to get the details. So this is also a class, and the class name is get movie details use case. Again we have to pass our repository. This function contain operation function invoke. We have to pass our IMDb ID. Use repository.getMovieDetails and simply pass your IMDb ID. Use here suspend keyword because repository.getMovieDetails is a suspendable function. Alright, so now we are pretty much done with our data layer and domain layer. It's time to begin with our Koin dependency injection. So first let's start with our data layer. So in the data layer I am going to create a directory name is di. In this we have a file, and the file name is data module. This contain a variable, and the variable name is data module. Here I'm going to create a module. So this module will return me few things like the repository implementation. So let's do that. For that I'm using here factory, and the type that this factory will return is our movie repository, and its implementation is given by our movie repo implementation, and the requirement of movie repository implementation is an API service. So let's create an API service from here. So API service, we have to pass our HTTP client in its constructor. So for that use ktor client.client. Okay, so now we have API service, so just inject that API service in our movie repository implementation. So this is our data module. Now it's time to create our domain module. So for that we have to create a directory in our domain layer, and in this we have to create a file, and the file name is domain module. This will contain a variable, and the variable name is domain module, which is initialized with the help of module. So this module will provide us the use cases. So for use factory get movie detail use case, and the requirement of this get movie detail use case is our repository. So simply use here get. Similarly we have to create one more factory in order to inject the get movie use case. Alright, so this is our domain module. Now it's time to create our view model. So for that we have our UI layer, and in this UI layer I'm going to create a directory, and the directory name is ViewModels. This will contain a view model naming movie view model. This class will extend view model, and in this we have to pass one thing, which is a get movie use case. So private val get movie use case. This will contain few things. First, it contains a UI state which actually used to hold our state. So UI state is nothing but a data class. In this we are having few parameters like is loading, which is boolean, and initialize this thing is false. Next we are having error. This is a type of string and initial value is, and lastly we have our data. So this data represent list of movie, and I'm gonna initialize this thing with null. Okay, so on the top we are having here UI state mutable state flow. So initialize this thing with empty UI state. Next we have UI state, which is actually used to expose this mutable state flow. So use UI state as state flow. Alright, so now this view model also stores the query that user type in the text field. So for that we have to create a private val query naming mutable state flow. This is an empty string. Now in the init block I'm gonna use ViewModel scope and launch a new coroutine. In this I'm gonna check my query. So first I will provide some throttle of 1 second. And after that, I'm using a filter to check if our query is not empty, then only I'm emitting the latest values. Okay, so once we receive the values, we will hit the API. So for that, we have another function, and the function name is getMovies. We have to pass our query in it. This will use ViewModel scope, launch a new coroutine. Now in this function, I'm gonna use getMovie use case. But we have to do few things in our getMovie use case. Instead of returning the result directly, I'm gonna wrap this result in result type, which is coming from the Kotlin, and this will contain a list of movie in it. Now open a pair of parentheses, remove this thing, cut this line of code, and in this I'm gonna use here try catch. Pass the exception if we found any. So val response. Now this response variable contains the information that we are receiving from the backend. So once we receive the response, we use a result success and pass our response in it. Else use a result dot failure and simply pass the exception. Now use a return keyword in front of this. Okay, now go back to your movie view model and take the leverage of our result type. So S, I'm gonna store this thing in response variable. If our response is success, then only I'm gonna update my UI state with the help of UI state. And in its data, we have response dot get or throw. So if we don't receive the result from the backend, it will throw an exception. But it will never happen because already we have checked response is success, then only you should update our UI state. Okay, so if it is not the case, on that case we have to update our UI state with error. And the error message is coming from a response.exception or null message to string. Once we start executing our function, we have to show a circular progress indicator in our screen. So for that we have to update our UI state corresponding to that. So is loading is true initially. Alright, so that's it for this getMovies function. Now it's time to create our second view model, which actually used to get the movie detail information. But before that, in this movie view model, we have to get a function, and the function name is update query. Pass the query, and what it will do, it will simply update our query. Query update, pass your string. Alright, so now it's time to create our second view model. So it's a class, and the class name is movie details view model. It will extend view model so that it extend all of the properties of our view model. And next we have to create a data class which actually used to hold our UI state. So we have here few parameters. So first we have loading, type is boolean and initial value is false. Next we have error, type is string, initialize this thing with empty string, and lastly the actual data, which is in our case movie detail, and initialize this movie detail with null. Alright, so in our movie details view model, I'm gonna create a UI state, private val underscore UI state, which is a mutable state flow details UI state. We have to create one more variable which actually used to expose this UI state. So use your underscore UI state and convert this thing in a form of state flow. In this we have a one function, and the one function name is get movie details. We have to pass our IMDb ID as a parameter in this function. In this function we have to use our ViewModel scope and launch a new coroutine. So in the constructor of our movie details view model, we have to use our use case, which is get movie details use case. Get movie detail use case, invoke, pass your IMDb ID and take the response in the response variable. Check if our response is success. So basically in this function we don't use result. So let's use this result. Type is movie details. Open a pair of parentheses, cut this thing out from here, create a variable naming response and take the response in this variable. wrap this stuff with try catch, because get movie detail is a REST API call and sometime it will throw an exception. So let's catch that exception in the catch block, and if it happens, use a result dot failure and pass the exception. Cut this thing out, paste it in here. Now from this I'm gonna return result dot success response and use return keyword here in front of our try. Alright, so now go back to your movie detail view model and use here is success. If it is success, simply update your UI state with detail UI state, pass the data which is response dot get or throw. Else, if it is not the case, you can use your UI state, update its value with detail UI state. And in this we have to update our error with the message that we were receiving from our response. So response exception or null message, use toString to stringify this. Okay, one more thing on the top, we have to update our UI state with detail UI state is loading true, so that it is possible for us to show a circular progress indicator. Alright, so that's it for our movie details view model. Now it's time to use dependency injection so that movie details view model is injectable in both platforms. Now view model is a very platform specific thing. For view model we have a different way of creating it. For iOS application we have a different way of creating a view model, and after that we are able to inject these view models in our platforms. So let's see how we can do this. So for that, in the UI I'm going to create a directory, and the directory name is dependency injection or DI. In this we have a file, and the file name is ViewModel module. We have to create an expect function shared ViewModel module, and return type of this thing is module. Now it's time to write the implementation or the actual implementation of this function. So for this, use your Android main, which is Android specific things. So I'm using Android main and the iOS main. Press OK. So first let's write the implementation for our iOS. So in iOS, I'm going to create a private variable naming ViewModel modules. Use here modules. So in this, I'm going to use single. First, I will provide my movie details view model. Next, movie view model, pass the use case. Alright, so this is our view model modules. Now I want to return this thing from our function shared view model module. If you want to inject your view models into your iOS application, so for that we have to create an object, and the object name is provide view model. Okay, and this will use Koin component. We have few function here. So first function is get movie details view model. Use get. So type of this get would be movie details view model. Similarly, we have one more function for get movie view model. Use get, and in this get I'm gonna use movie view model. Alright, so this is the implementation for our iOS main. Now we have to also give the implementation of our expect shared view model module function in Android main. So go to your Android main, open up your UI, dependency injection, view model module file, and in this we have to create a private wall view model module. Use here modules. Now for Android we have view model to create a view model instance so that it is injectable in our Android platform. So view model, let me import this view model, and this will return me movie details view model. Simply use the use case. Next we have one more view model for our movie view model. Okay, so simply from this function you can return your view model modules. That's it. One more thing which I forgot during the creation of our model classes in our data layer. So if you want to convert your JSON response into this Kotlin data classes, you have to use serialization annotation on the top of your Kotlin model classes. So for that, go to movie detail response, and on the top use here serializable. Simply copy this serializable annotation, go back to your movie DTO, paste on the top of our data class. Similarly, for the rating, for the search response, and yeah, we are pretty much done. Now we are going to set up Koin dependency injection framework for both platforms, Android and iOS. So let's begin with our Android platform. So for the Android, go to this Android main module, and here I'm gonna create my base application class. So base application. This class extend application, and in this we have on create lifecycle function. Here simply use start Koin and attach your Android context in it, and also all of the modules that you want to use in your Android platform. So for me, we have data module, then we have domain module, and lastly we have our shared ViewModel module. Alright, so now simply register this base application into your manifest. So for that, open up your Android app, source, Android manifest, and here simply attach the name of your application, which is base application. And one more thing, in this project we're gonna hit internet to receive some information. So for that you have to use this permission in your manifest. Okay, so now we are pretty much done with our Android setup. It's time to set up Koin dependency injection framework in our iOS. So for that, go to this iOS main module, and here I'm gonna create a helper file. So for that, we have a dependency injection directory that contain a simple file, and the file name is setup Koin di. So we have a function name is init Koin. Use start Koin and attach all of the modules. So first module is our data module, then we have our domain module, and lastly our shared module. So it's time to use init Koin function in our iOS app. So for that, on the top we have iOS app. Simply open this thing up. Again, open the iOS app that contain iOS Swift file. So open this thing up, and in this we have to use the function that we have just created in our iOS module. In this we have to use our init block, and in this init block I'm gonna use my setup Koin dikt dot do init Koin. Alright, so that's it for the iOS app setup. Alright, so we are done with our share module. Now it's time to begin with our Android app, and after that we will continue with our iOS application. So for the Android app, open up this Android app module, and in this Android I'm going to create a package, and the package name is navigation. So first I will set up my navigation. This contains a file, and the file name is app navigation. This is not a class, it's a normal file, and in this file we are having a composable, and the composable name is app navigation that has nav host to host our navigation. Requirement of nav host is nav controller, so let's create our nav controller with the help of remember nav controller. Simply pass your nav controller here, and in place of graph you can use start destination. So now it's a good time to create our destinations of our screen. So for that I'm using a sealed class naming dest. By the way, I'm using here type safe navigation. If you don't know about type safe navigation, you can watch this video. Okay, so we have here typically two destinations. First we have search. Next we have data class, and the data class name is details. In this we have to pass our IMDb ID. So by using this IMDb ID we will fetch movie details information. Okay, so if you want to use these two things as a destination, you should use serializable annotation on top of our classes or objects, and also on the sealed class. So in this start destination I want to begin my journey from search screen. We have here composable function, and in this composable function we have dest.search, and we have one more composable for our details, so dest.movie details or details. So this is our app navigation, and in our main activity I'm gonna use it. Now it's time to create our screens. So for that we have to create package again, and the package name is screens, and this screen contains two more package. First our search, and next our details. In this search package, I'm gonna create a file, and the file name is movie search screen. It contains a composable, and the composable name is movie search screen, and the requirement of movie search screen would be our view model, which is movie view model. First, I'm gonna create a state which actually used to collect my state flow in a form of state. So view model UI state collect as state with lifecycle. Import this thing up, and also we need one more state to hold our query value. So query by remember savable mutable state of empty string, and make sure to use here var. Import this thing up. Okay, so now I'm gonna use here scaffold. This scaffold contain a top bar, and in this top bar I'm using here text field so that user can type their query. And in place of value I'm gonna use my query, and if anything got changed I will simply update my query, and also I will call my view model update query function and pass my query in it. In this text field we have modifier, and in the modifier I'm using fill max width. I want to change its color, so this color is changed with the help of text field default dot colors. So I'm using here unfocused indicator color is transparent. Similarly, focused indicator color is also transparent. Okay, so we are pretty much done with our top app bar. Now it's time to begin with our main content that present in the scaffold. So first I'm gonna check my UI state is loading parameter. If it is true, on that case I'm gonna create a box having modifier, padding, fill max size, content alignment will be on the center that contains a simple circular progress indicator. If our UI state error is not empty, that means we receive some error from the backend. On that case, again I'm using a box gives padding, fill max size, and its content alignment will be again on the center. This will contain this time a text, not text field, it's a simple text. And through this text I'm gonna show the error to our user. Okay, so lastly, if it is a case of success, so UI state data, if it is not null, that means we receive the response. I will use a lazy column. This lazy column also contain modifier. First we have to use padding, which we receive from the scaffold, and next we have to use here fill max size because I want to occupy all of the size that we are having. In this we are having one function naming items. In this items I'm gonna pass my response, and one by one we are receiving my items in this trailing lambda, and in this I'm gonna create a column. This column have modifier, fill max width, and also I need padding. Horizontally let's say 16 dp, import this dp, and vertically I want 4 dp. And this will contain a glide image. In this glide image we have to pass our poster path, and our poster path is coming from it.poster. We have modifier, fill max width, and also I want here content scale crop. So this is our glide image. Just below to it I'm having a spacer modifier height of 12 dp. Just below to it we have text which is used to show us the picture name or the movie name. So for this we have it dot title. For this I'm having a style which is coming from our material theme, typography, and I'm using here headline medium. And yeah, we are pretty much done with this screen. Now it's time to use this screen in our app navigation. So go to your app navigation. In place of search destination composable training lambda, you can use your movie search screen, and the requirement of movie search screen is view model. So let's create our view model with the help of Koin view model. Mention the type, which is movie view model, and simply pass it. Alright, so this is our movie search screen. Now I'm going to execute my app to check whether everything works or not. Alright, so our app is executing, and I'm gonna type here Harry. Alright, so nothing happens. Let's see why it is not working. Okay, so in our movie view model, once we collect the query, we have to hit our get movies function. Okay, so now it's time to re-execute this application. Okay, so now I'm gonna type here Harry, and this time we are receiving the information. Alright, so it works. Now it's time to design our movie detail screen. But before that, we have to navigate from this screen, movie screen, to movie detail screen. So for that, go to your search package. This contain movie search screen. So open this thing up, and in our list item, I'm gonna attach a clickable event. So in this column, we have an clickable event. So this clickable event will be transferred to our parent composable, and on that parent composable, I'm gonna perform navigation. So first, let's use state hosting over here. So I'm gonna call this on click. This represent a lambda, and in this I'm gonna pass my IMDb ID. Okay, so in the on click lambda, use on click invoke and pass the IMDb ID. Go to your app navigation. So in this trailing lambda, we are receiving the IMDb ID. Now it's time to pass this IMDb ID to our detail screen. So for that, I'm using nav host controller dot navigate, and in place of destination, I'm gonna mention my destination, which is dest.details. Here we have to pass our IMDb ID, so simply pass it. Now in this composable, first I will fetch my IMDb ID, which we were passing from movie list screen. So it dot to route, mention the type of destination, which is dest.details, and this destination.details contain a parameter IMDb ID. I'm gonna create my view model with the help of Koin view model, and the type of this view model is movie detail view model. Use launch effect. When our IMDb ID changes, then only I'm gonna hit my view model dot get movie detail function. Pass your IMDb ID. Now it's time to create our movie detail screen. So for that, in this detail package, I'm gonna create a file, and the file name is movie detail screen. This is a file that contain a composable movie detail screen. Requirement of this movie detail screen is movie details view model. So first I'm gonna create a UI state, which is used to collect my mutable state flow that present in our movie detail view model. So view model UI state collect this thing in a form of state. If our UI state is loading is true, I'm using a box having modifier fill max size. Its content alignment is on the center, and this time we're gonna see a circular progress indicator. Next, if our UI state error is not empty, that means we receive some error from the backend. So modifier fill max size, content alignment is again on the center, and this time we will see a text UI state dot error. And if it is not the case of loading or error, then we are receiving the data, which is a response. And now I'm using column, and this column is again having a modifier fill max size, vertical scroll, remember scroll state. Now this column contain a glide image, and in its image model I'm using a response dot poster, modifier fill max width not size, and its content scale would be crop. Next we need few space, modifier height of 12 dp. Let me import this dp. Just below to it we have to show the title of this movie, which is coming from response dot title. Style is coming from material theme dot typography dot headline medium. Modifier fill max width, and we need padding horizontally of 12 dp. So this is our text, which is actually used to show us the title. Just below to it we need spacer to make some space. Modifier height of 12 dp. Again we have to show a text. Simply copy this thing up, paste it over here, remove this style, and this time I'm gonna show the plot, and also I want to add prefix of plot. Again we require space, so use spacer, modifier, height of 12 dp. Now I'm gonna copy this stuff one more time and paste it over here, and this time I'm gonna show language. So copy this language, paste it over here. Again copy this thing up, paste it in here. Now I want to show the genre. Okay, so if you want to show all the information, you can do that thing too, but for me I am done with this information. Now it's time to use movie title screen. So go to your app navigation and here use movie detail screen, pass your view model in it. Alright, so now it's time to re-execute our application and see whether this works or not. Okay, so I'm gonna type here Harry, click on it. Alright, so here you can see this is the information. Yeah, we are pretty much done with our Android app. Now we need to change one more thing which I forgot. So we have to add a placeholder in this text field. So for that, go to your movie search screen and in this text field use placeholder, and in this placeholder I'm gonna use a text which is actually used to show us this is a search box. So that's it. I'm gonna re-execute my application. Type here Harry, click on it, and now it looks fine. So yeah, we are pretty much done with our Android app. Now it's time to begin with our iOS application. So we are done with our Android application. Now it's time to begin with iOS application. So in order to collect state flows in iOS application, we have to add few helper files. So I have already added few helper files in our share code base. So this is our file that contains two class, common state flow and common cancelable. And we have one extension function common. This actually used to convert our state flow type T into common state flow type T. If you want to know why we need to do this kind of things in order to collect our state flows in iOS application, you can watch my shared state flow video. On that video I have explained everything. Okay, so now it's time to convert our normal state flows into common state flow. So just use here common extension function in movie details view model state flow. Similarly, go to your movie view model and convert this into common state flow. Now it's time to open our iOS app directory in Xcode. So this is our project, and in this project I have also added one more helper file, collect. This collect function is used to collect our common state flows in iOS application. Now it's time to create few groups. Groups means package in here. So first package is movie and next package is details. So in this movie I'm gonna create a file. This is a Swift file, and I'm gonna call this file movie view model wrapper. And in this file, first thing first, I'm gonna import all of my shared module. Now it's time to create a class, and the class name is movie view model wrapper, which is an observable object. This will contain few variables. First variable is our movie view model. Next variable is our UI state. Type would be a UI state. And I'm gonna initialize this UI state. So first loading is false, next error. So error is by default an empty string, and initial data is empty list. Because I want to use this UI state in my Swift UI, and I also want if anything got changed in this UI state, that change will be reflect in Swift UI. So for that, in Android we use mutable state flow. In here we use published variable. So just use here published annotation in front of your variable. Similarly, we have one more published variable naming query text. So this query text is actually used to hold our query. Type would be string, and by default value is empty string. And if anything got updated in this variable, on that case I'm gonna hit my view model update query function. So view model, this contain update query function, simply pass the query text. Alright, so now it's time to write constructor for our movie view model wrapper. So here we use init block, and in this init block I'm gonna first initialize my view model. With the help of provide view model shared get movie view model, I am initializing my view model. Now it's time to collect our state flow. So for that I'm having a variable, and the variable name is task. Type of this task is void and never. So basically it will return nothing and it will never throw any kind of exception. Now it's time to initialize this task with the help of task, and I want to execute this task in main actor. This will give me a big reference of myself. Okay, so task is similarly like we have in Kotlin coroutine. So with the help of Kotlin coroutine you can perform your task on the background thread. Similarly for iOS we have task in here. Okay, so now it's time to use our collect function. So make sure to use collect function that we have in helper.swift file. So in place of state flow I'm using first weak self reference, take our view model and pass our UI state. Next we have on each. So in our on each we are receiving value, and this value is actually used to update our UI state. So self unwrap this thing, UI state, update this thing with our value. Alright, so once we perform everything, then lastly we have here dinit. So just like in view model we have on cleared, here we have dinit. So I'm using my task and simply cancel all of my tasks. So that's it for our movie view model wrapper. Now it's time to create our movie detail view model wrapper. So for that, in this detail group I'm gonna create a file, and this file name would be movie details view model wrapper. So first I'm gonna import my shared module. Then it's time to create a class, and the class name is movie detail view model wrapper, which is an observable object. And in this first we have our view model, and type of this view model this time is movie details view model. In its init block I'm gonna initialize my view model with the help of my provide view model shared get movie details view model. And similarly we have to correct our state flows. So first we have to create a published variable naming UI state, and this time its type would be detail UI state. Initialize this thing with detail UI state dot init. Is loading is false, and in place of error I'm gonna use here empty string, and in place of movie details by default I'm using here nil or null. Okay, so now it's time to collect our state flow. So similarly I'm gonna create a task. Type of this task is task. It will return nothing and it will never throw any kind of exception. Now here I'm gonna initialize this task with actual task. I want to execute this task in my main thread. That's why I'm using here main actor. It will give me a weak self reference that we will use in here. Await collect function, and in place of state flow we will use our self unwrap this thing view model pass your UI state. In place of on each we are receiving value, and this value is used to update our UI state that we are having here on the top. So let's do that. Self unwrap this thing UI state, update this thing with our value that we are receiving in our on each block. Okay, so now it's time to cancel everything once we are done with our screen. So for that we are here having dinit, use your task and simply cancel this thing up. Okay, so now we are pretty much done with our movie details view model wrapper. It's time to create our Swift UI. So first let's start with our movie. So for that we require one file, and this time I'm gonna use here Swift UI view, and I will call this movie view. Okay, so this will give you a preview. So for the time being just leave that preview. And here in this file first I'm gonna create a variable, and this variable is nothing but our view model wrapper. So movie view model wrapper, initialize this thing with movie view model wrapper. Okay, so now it's time to write our view. So I'm using here navigation view because I want to perform navigation. So that's why we have to wrap the root of our application with navigation view. So this is our navigation view, and in its content we're gonna write the content that we want to show. So we have here a v stack, and in this v stack first I'm gonna check my UI states variables. So for that, if our movie view model wrapper dot UI state is loading, on that case I want to show a progress view, so use here progress view. If our movie view model wrapper UI state error is empty, if it is not the case, on that case I'm gonna simply show a text, and in this we have to show a string which actually use our movie view model wrapper UI state error message. Alright, so lastly we have success state. If our movie view model wrapper dot UI state data is not equivalent to empty list, that means we are receiving some data from the backend. So now it's time to design our user interface. So first let's begin with our movie search screen. So for that we need a new file, Swift UI view, and I'm gonna call this movie search view. So first I'm gonna create an observed object. This observed object is nothing but our movie view model wrapper. Initialize this thing with movie view model wrapper. Now it's time to create our user interface. So first I'm gonna use here navigation view because we want to perform navigation once user click to our movie item. Remove this navigation link from the content, and here on the top I'm having a Z stack. So Z stack is a box in Swift UI. Now in this Z stack I'm gonna check few things. So first our movie view model wrapper dot its UI state is loading parameter. If it is true, on that case I'm gonna show a progress view. If our movie view model wrapper dot UI state error is empty, if it is not the case, that means we receive some error and it's time to show the error message. So movie view model wrapper UI state error. And lastly we have success state. So if our movie view model wrapper UI state data, if it is not equivalent to an empty string, that means we receive some information from the backend. And now it's time to create our list. So in this list first we have to pass our list which is coming from movie view model wrapper dot UI state data, and if it is null, on that case I'm using here empty string. Next in this we have a parameter of id. So parameter of id is nothing but our self. In its trailing lambda we are receiving one by one our item, and I want to add here style. So list style is plain style, and also its padding is 0. Now it's time to create our movie item. So for that I'm using here vstack. So vstack is a column, and in this vstack we are having here async image. So async image is actually used to download your image from URL. So in async image you can choose that has 3 parameter: URL, content and placeholder. So in place of URL I'm gonna simply mention my URL which is item.poster. In place of content we are receiving an image, and it's time to perform some modifier in it. So image dot resizable, its aspect ratio is fill. Lastly we have frame in it, and in its frame I'm using width. So width is infinity and its height is 300, and in place of placeholder I'm using a progress view. Okay, so that's it for our async image. Just below to it we have a text, and in this text I'm going to show my title. So item dot title, its font family is title, and its font weight bold, and its foreground color is black. And I want to give alignment to our vstack. So alignment is, in our case, it's on the leading, on the start. Now it's time to add few more modifier to our vstack. So I'm using here ignore safe area, then padding. So padding horizontally I want 16, and padding from vertical I want 8. So when user click to this item, we want to navigate. So for that we have here background, and in this background I want to attach a navigation link. So with the help of navigation link, make sure to choose the navigation link which has parameter destination and label. So in place of destination we have to mention our destination screen. So for us we have to navigate from this screen, I mean search screen, to detail screen. So let's create our detail screen in this detail group. We have new file Swift UI view, and I'm gonna call this movie details view. We have to pass our IMDb ID in here. So IMDb ID type is string, and here just add IMDb ID, empty string. Okay, so now go back to our movie search view, and in here it's time to add our destination, which is movies detail view. And in place of IMDb ID, I'm simply using my item and pass my IMDb ID. Next we have label. So in label I'm doing nothing. Lastly, just add opacity to 0. Alright, so we are done. Now it's time to attach this search box on the top so that user can perform query. So for that I'm using my Z stack, and in this Z stack I'm going to add a modifier naming searchable, and in this text I'm using $movie view model wrapper dot query text. Alright, so we are done with our this screen. Now it's time to continue with our detail screen. So for that go back to detail view, and here first thing first I want my observed object. So observed object is nothing but our movie details view model. Initialize this thing with movie details view model wrapper. Now it's time to write our UI. So first I'm using here Z stack, and in this Z stack I'm going to check my movie detail view model dot UI state is loading. If it is true, on that case I'm going to show a progress view. If our movie detail view model UI state error is empty, if it is not the case, then I'm simply show a text, and in this text movie detail view model UI text error. And lastly we have our success state. So movie detail view model UI state data, if it is not equivalent to nil, that means we receive some information from the backend. We are going to use here scroll view, and in this scroll view we have V stack, and in this V stack first thing first I'm gonna create my async image. So choose async image that has parameter URL, content and placeholder. In place of URL we have to pass our URL. So this is coming from our movie detail view model UI state data dot poster. Next we have content. So in content we are receiving image. It's time to perform modifier. So image dot resizable, aspect ratio is fill. Next we have placeholder. So in place of placeholder I'm going to show a progress view. So that's it for our async image. Just below to it I'm going to create one more V stack, and in this V stack this time I'm going to use here alignment from leading. In the content I'm going to add all of the things. So first we have to add text, which is actually used to show us the movie title. Movie detail view model UI state data. Unwrap this data, and in this we have title. Okay, so we have here font family of title, then we have here font weight of bold, and lastly it's foreground color. So this time it's black. Just below to it I want space, so that's why I'm using here spacer, and in this spacer we have min length, so I want 12 dp. And now it's time to just copy paste the other things. So these are very straightforward things: text, then spacer, then text, then spacer, then text, then spacer. So we have this. Okay, so instead of using movie detail view model wrapper, here we have movie details view model. So simply copy this stuff and change in every place. Okay, so lastly I am going to add here padding, and horizontally I want 16 dp. Okay, so lastly once our Z stack or On the top we wrap everything with z tag. So simply minimize this, and once our z tag is up here, I want to perform an operation. So our operation is movie detail view model dot view model get movie details, and simply pass our IMDb ID. So this will eventually fetch all of the information from the backend. One more thing, go to your movie details view model and make sure to write if condition here in your task. And yeah, now we are pretty much done. Let me see this movie search view. I forgot one thing in my list item, which is list row insets. I want here edge insets. And now it's time to execute our application. But make sure to use this movie search view in your iOS app. So go to your iOS app and change your content view to movie search view. Execute your application. Okay, so now I'm going to type here Harry. Okay, so here we have our search item. Now when I click to this first item, alright, so we are able to see our detail screen. That means functionality while everything works, but we have some UI issues. So let's fix it. Go to your Xcode. So instead of using this Z stack, I want to change this thing in V stack. And now I want to execute my application. And I want to type here Harry. Alright, so I have done very small mistakes. So in our movie list item async image, I'm not using here clipped. Okay, so go to your movie details view, and here in your scroll view, add ignore safe area. Now re-execute our application. Alright, so I'm typing here Harry. And yeah, there we go. This is our list item. Now when I click any of this, you can see this is our details. Alright, so yeah, that's it for this video. I hope you learned a lot of things during this video. If you do so, like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also please write your comments. So we will meet in our next video where we will discuss something new about Android or KMP. Till that, very goodbye.